Progress Report 10, April 21st. I figured out a new way to set up the mixing machines in the bakery to speed up production. Mr. Donner says he will save labor costs and increase profits. He gave me a $50 bonus and a $10 a week raise. I wanted to take Joe Carp and Frank Riley out to lunch to celebrate, but Joe had to buy some things for his wife, and Frank was meeting his cousin for lunch. I guess it will take time for them to get used to the changes in me. Everyone seems frightened of me. When I went over to Gimpy and tapped him on the shoulder to ask him something, he jumped up and dropped his cup of coffee all over himself. He stared at me when he thinks I'm not looking. Nobody at the place talks to me anymore, or kids around the way they used to. It makes the job kind of lonely. Thinking about it makes me remember the time I fell asleep standing up and Frank kicked my legs out from under me. The warm sweat smell, the white walls, the roar of the oven when Frank opens the door to shift the loaves. Suddenly falling, twisting, everything out from under me and my head cracking against the wall. It's me, and yet it's like someone else lying there, another Charlie. He's confused, rubbing his head, staring up at Frank, tall and thin, and then at Gimpy nearby, massive, hairy, grey-faced Gimpy with bushy eyebrows that almost hide his blue eyes. "Leave the kid alone," says Gimp. "Jesus, Frank, why do you always gotta pick on him?" "It don't mean anything," laughs Frank. "It don't hurt him. He don't know any better. Do you, Charlie?" Charlie rubs his head and cringes. He doesn't know what he's done to deserve this punishment, but there is always the chance that there will be more. "But you know better," says Gimpy, clamping over on his orthopedic boot. "So what the hell do you always picking on him for?" The two men sit down at the long table, the tall Frank and the heavy Gimp shaping the dough for the rolls that have to be baked for the evening orders. They work in silence for a while, and then Frank stops and tips his white cap back. "Hey, Gimp, think Charlie could learn to bake rolls?" Gimp leans an elbow on the work table. "Why don't we just leave him alone?" "No, I mean it, Gimp. Seriously. I bet he could learn something simple like making rolls." The idea seems to appeal to Gimpy, who turns to stare at Charlie. "Maybe you got something there." "Hey, Charlie, come here a minute." As he usually does when people are talking about him, Charlie has been keeping his head down, staring at his shoelaces. He knows how to lace and tie them. He could make rolls. He could learn to pound, roll, twist, and shape the dough into the small, round forms. Frank looks at him uncertainly. Maybe we shouldn't, Gimp. Maybe it's wrong. If a moron can't learn, maybe we shouldn't start anything with him. You leave this to me, says Gimpy, who has now taken over Frank's idea. I think maybe he can learn. Now listen. Charlie, you want to learn something? You want me to teach you how to make rolls like me and Frank are doing? Charlie stares at him, the smile melting from his face. He understands what Gimpy wants, and he feels concerned. He wants to please Gimpy, but there is something about the words learn and teach, something to remember about being punished severely, but he doesn't recall what it is. Only a thin white hand upraised, hitting him to make him learn something he couldn't understand. Charlie backs away, but Gimpy grabs his arm. Hey kid, take it easy. We ain't gonna hurt you. Look at him shaking like he's gonna fall apart. Look, Charlie, I got a nice new shiny good luck piece for you to play with. He holds out his hand and reveals a brass chain with a shiny brass disc that says Starbright Metal Polish. He holds the chain by one end and the gleaming gold disc rotates slowly, catching the light of the fluorescent bulbs. The pendant is a brightness that Charlie remembers, but he doesn't know why or what. He doesn't reach for it. He knows you get punished if you reach out for other people's things. If someone puts it into your hand, that is all right, but otherwise it's wrong. When he sees that Gimpy is offering it to him, he nods and smiles again. That he knows, laughs Frank. Give him something bright and shiny. Frank, who has let Gimpy take over the experiment, leans forward excitedly. Maybe if he wants that piece of junk bad enough, and you tell him he'll get it if he learns to shape the dough into rolls, maybe it'll work. As the bakers set to the task of teaching Charlie, others from the shop gather around. Frank clears an area between them on the table, and Gimpy pulls off a medium-sized piece of dough for Charlie to work with. There is talk of betting on whether or not Charlie can learn to make rolls. Watch us carefully, says Gimpy, putting the pendant beside him on the table where Charlie can see it. Watch and do everything we do. If you learn how to make rolls, you'll get this shiny good luck piece. Charlie hunches over on his stool, intently watching Gimpy, picking up the knife and cut off a slab of dough. He studies each movement as Gimpy rolls out the dough into a long roll, breaks it off and twists it into a circle, pausing now and then to sprinkle it with flour. "Now watch me," says Frank, and he repeats Gimpy's performance. Charlie is confused. There are differences. Gimpy holds his elbow out as he rolls the dough like a bird's wings, but Frank keeps his arms close to his sides. Gimpy keeps his thumbs together with the rest of his fingers as he kneads the dough, but Frank works with the flat of his palms, keeping thumbs apart from his other fingers and up in the air. Worrying about these things makes it impossible for Charlie to move when Gimpy says, "Go ahead, try it." Charlie shakes his head. "Look, Charlie, I'm gonna do it again, slow. Now you watch everything I do, and do each part along with me. Okay? But try to remember everything so then you'll be able to do the whole thing alone. Now come on, like this." Charlie frowns as he watches Gimpy pull off a section of dough and roll it into a ball. He hesitates, but then he picks up the knife and slices off a piece of dough and sets it down in the center of the table. Slowly, keeping his elbows out exactly as Gimpy does, he rolls it into a ball. He looks from his own hands to Gimpy's, and he is careful to keep his fingers exactly the same way, thumbs together with the rest of his fingers, slightly cupped. He has to do it right, the way Gimpy wants him to do it. There are echoes inside him that say, "Do it right and they will like you," and he wants Gimpy and Frank to like him. When Gimpy has finished working his dough into a ball, he stands back, and so does Charlie. "Hey, that's great! Look, Frank, he made it into a ball." Frank nods and smiles. Charlie sighs, and his whole frame trembles as the tension builds. He is unaccustomed to this rare moment of success. "All right now," says Gimpy. "Now we make a roll." Awkwardly but carefully, Charlie follows Gimpy's every move. Occasionally, a twitch of his hand or arm mars what he is doing, but in a little while he is able to twist off a section of the dough and fashion it into a roll. Working beside Gimpy, he makes 6 rolls, and sprinkling them with flour, he sets them carefully alongside Gimpy's in the large flour-covered tray. "All right, Charlie." Gimpy's face is serious. "Now let's see you do it by yourself. Remember all the things you did from the beginning. Now go ahead." Charlie stares at the huge slab of dough and at the knife that Gimpy has pushed into his hand, and once again panic comes over him. What did he do first? How did he hold his hand, his fingers? Which way did he roll the ball? 1,000 confusing ideas burst into his mind at the same time, and he stands there smiling. He wants to do it, to make Frank and Gimpy happy and have them like him, and to get the bright good luck piece that Gimpy has promised him. He turns the smooth, heavy piece of dough around and around on the table, but he cannot bring himself to start. He cannot cut into it because he knows he will fail and he is afraid. "He forgot already," said Frank. "It don't stick." He wants it to stick. He frowns and tries to remember. First you start to cut off a piece. Then you roll it out into a ball. But how does it get to be a roll like the ones in the tray? That's something else. Give him time and he'll remember. As soon as the fussiness passes away, he'll remember. Just another few seconds and he'll have it. He wants to hold on to what he's learned for a little while. He wants it so much. "Okay, Charlie," sighs Gimpy, taking the cutter off of his hand. "That's all right. Don't worry about it. It's not your work anyway. Another minute and he'll remember. If only they wouldn't rush him. Why does everything have to be in such a hurry?" "Go ahead, Charlie. Go sit down and look at your comic book. We got to get back to work." Charlie nods and smiles, and pulls the comic book out of his back pocket. He smooths it out and puts it on his head as a make-believe hat. Frank laughs and Gimpy finally smiles. "Go on, you big baby," snorts Gimpy. "Go sit down there until Mr. Donner wants you." Charlie smiles at him and goes back to the flour sacks in the corner near the mixing machines. He likes to lean back against them while he sits on the floor cross-legged and looks at the pictures in his comic book. As he starts to turn the pages, he feels like crying, but he doesn't know why. What is there to feel sad about? The fuzzy cloud comes and goes, and now he looks forward to the pleasure of the brightly colored pictures in the comic book that he has gone through 30-40 times. He knows all of the figures in the comic. He has asked their names over and over again of almost everyone he meets, and he understands that the strange forms of letters and words in the white balloons above the figures means that they are saying something. Would he ever learn to read what was in the balloons? If they gave him enough time, if they didn't rush him or push him too fast, he would get it, but nobody has time. Charlie pulls his legs up and opens the comic book to the first page, where the Batman and Robin are swinging up a long rope to the side of a building. Someday, he decides, he is going to read, and then he will be able to read the story. He feels a hand on his shoulder and he looks up. It is Gimpy holding out the brass disc and chain, letting it swing and twirl around so that it catches the light. "Here," he says gruffly, tossing it into Charlie's lap, and then he limps away. I never thought about it before, but that was a nice thing for him to do. Why did he? Anyway, that is my memory of the time, clearer and more complete than anything I have ever experienced before. Like looking out of the kitchen window early when the morning light is still gray. I've come a long way since then, and I owe it all to Dr. Strauss and Professor Nemur and the other people here at Beekman. But what must Frank and Gimpy think and feel now, seeing how I have changed? April 22nd. People at the bakery are changing, not only ignoring me. I can feel the hostility. Donner is arranging for me to join the Bakers' Union, and I've gotten another raise. The rotten thing is that all of the pleasure is gone because the others resent me. In a way, I can't blame them. They don't understand what has happened to me, and I can't tell them. People are not proud of me the way I expected, not at all. Still, I have got to have someone to talk to. I'm going to ask Miss Kinnian to go to a movie tomorrow night to celebrate my race, if I can get up the nerve.